Hi everyone. This is a video, a quick lecture to complement your readings and your work around Lexis and genre this week. Specifically genre, because although we are doing some robust reading around genre, I think we have 3 readings having to do with genre, one of them optional. I also want to kind of walk through how writing scholars understands this idea of how writing studies, writing scholarship understands this idea of genre and genre theory, because it is different from probably what you think of when you first hear the word genre. So before we get to genre though, we'll talk about Lexis briefly. I think Lexis is a bit more, it's just a bit more approachable. But one thing I want to point out is that both of these ideas, right, are are necessarily inherent to our discourse community. If we have correctly identified a discourse community, it necessarily will have some Lexis. It necessarily will utilize or possess one or more genres, because, of course, those are 2 of the 6 criteria that define a discourse community. Yes, a discourse community. Also, we've done this in the past, but because Lexis is a concept that's associated with writing, and we know that writing achieves all of these goals, right? The people use writing to do something. People use writing to make meaning, to mediate, to shape the experience of activities, and in doing so, it enculturates. We can just apply Lexis here as well. So people use Lexis to do something, to accomplish specialized goals. People use Lexis to make meaning. And I think this week's reading, Perry classes, learning the language, in the discussion board, it really shows well how a discourse community uses a specific Lexis to accomplish some certain goals. Also, importantly, class will show us how assuming the specialized language of a discourse community is a process of enculturation. So she's really clear about how it affects the discourse community, how it helps them meet some goals. And she's also really clear about some of the tensions, some of the values or implied ideas that assuming this specified hospital Lexis carry, how her acquisition of that Lexis is thus enculturating to her. So class gives us a really good example of something that we can choose to do in our discourse community report. Examine the Lexis and both make an argument about how it helps the discourse community achieve its certain goals, and also, this is sort of an and/or situation, and/or comment on what it's like to become enculturated, the sort of culture that Lexis carries with it. So this week, I'll ask you those questions relating to classes piece, Perry classes learning the language, and also I'm going to ask you to sort of brainstorm and come up with the specified Lexis, the specific specialized language of your discourse community, as well as analyze it for what sort of culture or ways of thinking, ways of being, ways of understanding it carry along with it. So you may see that my dog River has joined us. So these ideas of Lexis really jibe, they really map onto really easily the ideas that we talked about last week, ideas of literacy, ideas of discourse, ideas, and all of the social aspects that come along with that. What I want to spend the rest of this video doing is focusing on this idea of genre. I think we need to spend a little bit more time on genre because writing scholars, rhetoric scholars, writing studies scholars, they all understand genre, I think, in a quite different way than perhaps you might understand it. First of all, though, just like Lexis, by definition, all of our discourse communities should possess and use at least one genre to meet its goals. Similarly, because writing does all of these. We know that all writing accomplishes these threshold concepts. We can say that all genre accomplishes these threshold uses these threshold concepts. In other words, just like people would use Lexis to do something to accomplish specialized goals, people are going to use genre to do something to accomplish specialized goals. Use genre to make meaning, to shape, to mediate the activities of users. That is to say, to bring about change, accomplish goals, and of course, genres enculturate. Becoming fluent in a genre, just as becoming fluent in a Lexis, or just as becoming fluent in a discourse with a capital D, might lead to this process of enculturation. Even something perhaps as seemingly neutral as the genre of a resume, right? Something seemingly as neutral as a resume contains enculturation. If you learn to write a resume in a certain way, you learn to write a really good resume. That might entail you accepting certain values that the resume impresses upon you. What am I talking about? Well, where do you put your education on a resume? You put it pretty high up, which suggests that it's important and suggests that the prestige of the university you attended is, perhaps even more important than your work experience, depending on where it comes in the resume. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's what these concepts look like. It makes writing really interesting in that way. Okay, but how do writing scholars understand genre? If you have never studied genre before, or if you haven't done our readings yet, you might simply think, well, genre is a category. It's a group of, songs or texts or paintings or whatever. And that's half right. In fact, as our glossary definition, as a lot of other definitions of genre will point out, it's related to the word genus, which you might know as part of the scientific classification system. It's related to the word gender, right, which is a sort of classification system. However, rhetoric scholars say, yeah, we can think about it as a category of things based on their similarities, a category of text. Let's just focus on text at this point, a category of writing based on its similarities. But more importantly, rhetorical scholars have said we also need to pay attention to the social function of a genre. Carolyn Miller really kind of did the foundational work on this. Her paper, Genre as Social Action from 1984, is really foundational. If you think genre is one of the things you're going to focus on in your discourse community report, how your discourse community uses genre, boy, would this be a great piece to read and review and understand and ultimately use as you sort of set up your inquiry project. Carolyn Miller argues that a rhetorically sound definition of genre must be centered not on the substance or the form of discourse, but on the action it is used to accomplish. What the heck does that mean? Well, let's think about the resume. One definition of what makes something a resume, we could say, well, it's a resume if your name is written really large at the top, if it contains your work experience, if it contains where you went to school, and if it contains, I don't know, what am I missing? Any awards that you've won. That's based on the text itself. That's one way to think about a resume. Miller says, but that's not all. That's not the only thing that all resumes have in common. Miller says, foundationally, the one thing that all resumes have in common is not the substance or even the form, the shape, but on the action it is used to accomplish. So Miller would say, above all else, we recognize a resume because we recognize that it is a document that we're using to try to get a job. So rhetoric scholars move a little bit beyond just what does it say, what does it contain, how is it organized, what does it look like, and they ask, well, what goal is it trying to accomplish? So it's not just defined by the formal features or the conventions. Instead, those features are actually the result of a purpose that recurs in multiple rhetorical situations over and over and over again. Purpose and action in a given rhetorical situation are what drive the features of a genre. In other words, the features of a genre aren't idiosyncratic. They're not just there. What do I mean by that? Well, let's think again about the resume. Why do you put your name really large at the top of a resume? Well, you might say, well, that's just how resumes are done. But Miller's saying, no, it's not just random, it's not archetypal. That feature of the resume has come to be accepted, has come to be central because over and over and over and over and over and over again, people have written a document that, right, the author is somebody who wants a job. The audience is somebody who wants to hire someone. The purpose is to get you that job. The exigence is to show that you're a good employee, right? That rhetorical situation has repeated so many times that the best text to achieve that specific purpose has sort of codified. It's sort of become accepted as the genre. And so back to our specific point, it's not just random that your name goes really large in big letters at the top of a resume. That is a feature of that genre that is a result of the rhetorical situation. In other words, because you want the employer to see your name, remember it, and be able to, locate your resume immediately and even contact you. So maybe that's why contact information is included up there. Those aren't random features. Those are there. Those features have come about because of the goal of the genre. In this case, to get a job. All this is to say that genre is situated, just like all writing is, within this rhetorical situation. So how do genres come to be? Well, as we read, or you will read, Lloyd Bitzer says that when something new happens that requires a response, someone must create the first response. And when that situation happens again, another person uses the first response as a basis for the second. And then everyone who encounters the situation is basing their response on the previous one, resulting in the creation of a new genre. There is the example in the reading of the first State of the Union address. That's a really helpful example, right? Whenever George Washington needed to address the entire nation, he was the first president of the United States to be in that rhetorical situation. And he wrote a speech, actually, as we know, Hamilton wrote the speech, I believe. But right, this text was created that met the purposes of that rhetorical situation. Then, whenever number two, whenever John Adams had to do that same thing, the second president of the United States had to create a text that that met those same purposes. He didn't start from scratch. He said, well, old George has been here before. He accomplished these goals through a piece of writing. Let me look at how he did that, and the next president after him did that, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the one way to exemplify those recurring rhetorical situations that lead to genres.